Continuing our exploration of board game Tactica, we're looking at this idea of universal board gaming rules. Whatever that title is that you pulled out, that you're set up, that you're ready to play, there are certain fundamentals to board games that we want to be aware of, because if the opportunity presents itself, it opens up the Tactica possibility of utilizing it. Now, if you do that or not, that depends on the game. And of course, that depends on the toolkit where you are. But being aware is so important. And one of the things we explored in yesterday's Tactica vlog that I pushed up to the board gaming playlist here was this idea of making mistakes when you're playing a board game. I'm going to make mistakes. I want to do my best to minimize my mistakes. If I'm playing a co-op, I don't want to be the team member to sink the team. If we're playing Zombicide, I don't want to be the player that gets killed. So I'm trying to minimize my mistakes. If it's part of a bigger game like Game of Thrones or TI, I'm trying to not make mistakes. So this way I eliminate my weaknesses. Easier said than done, and I go for tabletop glory. But likewise, I want to be open to the mistakes that you make, the mistakes that my opponents make. This idea that if I can be in a position, yes, I'm going about trying to do my own tactics. Yes, I'm trying to push my own agenda in the board game, but I want to keep back 10%, 20% of my resources, whether it's an armada or some cards to build something or an area of the map that I can go in and explore anytime, but I'm going to hold off. I want to hold on to that. I want to hold on to that for a little bit, simply because if my opponent makes a mistake and I can see it, I've got something that's not committed that hopefully I can exploit. So this idea of minimizing my mistakes, encouraging your mistakes or the other players, and being able to capitalize. So within that framework, there's various tactics that help with this. And we're going to look at the idea of dominating a resource. And I'm going to be illustrating this from the perspective of Settlers because it really taught me a lot early on. I tend to be more of a beer and pretzels type board gamer because the tight resource control tactics, I kind of get that on the wargaming side of Wargaming Fritz. But there are times that I played resource management games or really alliance-based games, again, like TI, Twilight Imperium, or Game of Thrones. So in terms of Settlers, there's been a few times where we're playing a big game based on how the tiles played out with resources and the areas where I'm kind of resource poor. I'm going to be generating, let's say, a lot of iron. And it's going to be hard for me to get other resources. So now I have to kind of make a decision of, do I push for those other resources, or do I just say, based on the turn that I have, do I just go all in for iron and maybe one other resource? So sometimes if it's a resource-based game, you want to have a monopoly. You want to control 100% of that resource. You want to go all in. Now, you're going to need other resources to build your ships and your roads and your cities or your Starfleet, whatever it's going to be. But if I can generate massive alpha on one primary resource, again, going back to iron, if I can generate massive amounts for that, yes, there's limited things that I can build, but then I will have such an abundance of that I can afford to pursue. Because remember, my action points, my turns, my resources, whatever capital that I have in terms of move management to develop things out, I'm all in that one area of the game. I'm all in that one area of the game. So by doing that, overloading in that area, I can now, if I need other resources, I need stone, I need wool, I need wood, I can make you an offer that, hey, look, I need it, but I'm making you such a good offer. Instead of trading you 2 iron, I'll give you 5. You're like, I can't turn this offer down. I mean, yes, there's the chance to cripple Fritz because he doesn't have enough of other resources, but he's making me an offer I can't refuse. This is crazy what he's giving to me. I have to go for it because not only am I competing against him, but I'm competing against other players. So sometimes if you have a monopoly, it's based on how the board randomly plays out and the side you're on. Sometimes it might be a deliberate focused resource. It might be a plan. Now, let's talk about other things that you can possibly dominate in one area of the game. There were a couple of times, for whatever reason, playing Settlers, I had resource cards. I'm just buying mad resource cards. Maybe that's the only resources that I could generate to buy those and certain areas. So my entire tactic was to focus everything on resource cards. Is that a tactic that I can control? No, because it's random. I'm drawing these resource cards or action cards, whatever the action cards were. Get to do this, get to do that, play this card, steal this from a player, those type of cards. I have no control over what I'm drawing. I'm paying some resources, I'm investing in it, I'm drawing it. Those resources are random in that I draw a card, I don't know what I'm getting. If I put those same resources into a road or a city or a village or whatever, or a starship, I'm going to get it. But sometimes what you'll see, this is called the overload. You'll take your resources and based on a game mechanic, go all in there and just bomb the heck out of it and acquire everything and then use that in a way that your opponent can't counter, absolutely cannot counter. So this idea of looking at resources in a game or looking at some game mechanic that lets you do something or one area of the game and focusing everything into there. A lot of players will try to develop things out equally. Then they'll see what areas they're just naturally pulling ahead, maybe invest in that. I'll look at what areas you're weak in and try to pull more from there. All viable and more conservative tactics. But going all in one area deliberately, it's an interesting tactic. Now, would I recommend this? Well, no, I wouldn't, because it's very risky. If there's a counter to it, or if that doesn't quite work out, you literally have no other backup plan. So why am I pushing this out to a vlog? Well, sometimes, again, going back to a couple of games with Settlers and TI, sometimes just based on the random setup and the deployment and where you happen to be sitting at the table, because we're going to start with you, then go to you, then go to you, then go to you, and then I'm the last player to deploy, I have the weakest position. So sometimes you have a weak position and you say, because I'm coming from such a weak point, the 3, 4, 5, 6 turns, it will take me to dig out and get to a point where I'm equal to a fellow player. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And then other times, just based on the wackiness of a game system, maybe you draw some cards or some abilities or have something that it just happens to work out. And you say, I'm going to double, triple, be completely in. So it's really more of I found myself in this situation. Do I embrace it and go all in, or do I try and dig myself out and get to a good starting point, but then I've lost 4, 5, 6, or 7 turns? That is more of the tactica. Outside of that, I'm going to do my best to win. I'm going to do my best to give you a good game. Sometimes for the lulls, sometimes just to see how people react to things or how they can deal with things, or just because we've played this game and I love the game lots and lots of times straight, I want to try something different. Sometimes you'll deliberately dip into this tactic just to do something different. But in terms of resource management, in terms of a good conservative tactic, it's not. This is kind of on the fringe. It's kind of moving along with this idea of tricknology. Consider it a tool, not necessarily a primary tool, more of a tool of opportunity in your board game toolkit.